Hello and welcome to episode 21 of Art Snaps, the podcast celebrating Swindon's superb collection of modern British art, which is written and presented by me, Katie Ackrell. I work as an engagement officer for Swindon Museum and Art Gallery's Art on Tour project, and I also happen to be a big fan of art history, so making this podcast has been making lockdown a lot of fun for me. Obviously, we're not really officially in lockdown anymore, well, not in the same way that we were when I started the podcast, but there are some things that we still can't do. We can't go to Swindon Museum and Art Gallery yet, sadly, so I'm continuing to bring the collection to you this way. And another thing we can't do this summer is enjoy a good festival or a good gig. And in thinking about the fact that this is festival season and we're really missing out on live music this year, I've decided to focus this art snap on depictions of music from Swindon's collection. So I've gone with 3 pieces by Walter Sickert, Raymond Mason and Howard Hodgkin, which were influenced by music events of varying kinds. But before I go on, I do want to apologise quickly for the kind of echoey quality that you might be experiencing in my audio today and any random noises that might occur. It's about 33 degrees at the time of recording, so I can't currently sit in my office and have sought refuge in my kitchen. So the audio quality might not be as good, and I do apologise for that, but hopefully you'll enjoy the podcast anyway. And I want to begin with this fantastic drawing by Walter Sickert, who was a founding member of the Camden Town Group, who focused on capturing the modern urban life of London. And for Sickert, this included really interesting depictions of performers and audiences of popular entertainment, such as the circus, the theatre, and music concerts. And this also applies to the work he did in the French fishing port of Dieppe, which he regarded as his second home. He visited frequently for 40 years and lived there for a time too, between 1989 and 1905. And over this long period of time, he was influenced by life in Dieppe as much as London. And he created brilliant atmospheric paintings of a variety of subject matter, including the local fishing community, landscapes, architecture, and again, popular entertainment. And this drawing by Sickert in Swindon's collection depicts a cafe concert, which is essentially light musical entertainment within a bar or cafe. And it's shown at a place called Vernet, which was a cabaret restaurant that Sickert visited frequently. And it was created when he returned to Dieppe after the war in 1919 and found a renewed interest in painting figures within interiors, largely within entertainment venues like Vernet's. It's only a small piece at just under 35 by 22 centimetres because it's actually a study for a painting, which is now in a private collection. But I did see it at Pallant House Gallery's exhibition Sickert in Dieppe back in 2015, which was really exciting because I recognised it right away based on the sketch that I knew from Swindon's collection. Compositionally, they're very similar, so I could see that Sickert's vision of the painting was quite well developed when he made this study. In the foreground, pushed up to our space, we can see a table strewn with drinks and crockery. Then the eye recedes backwards through the tables and into the midground where there's a crowd of people with their backs to us. There's a lovely graphic quality to the way they're drawn, with such an economical and simple use of line. But this is applied very lightly, so we can rest on them for a moment, but ultimately we keep moving backward to the singer on the stage, who's actually the focal point of the drawing. And she's depicted with just a few simple lines of ink, with her arms raising in the air to show that she's in mid-performance. And in the final painting, she is again in the background, but the most spotlit figure in the scene, so the eye goes straight to her. Before we move on, I just want to hover on this point about lighting for a moment, because I think that the most striking thing about this drawing is the way Sickert has cross-hatched the ceiling to represent darkness, but then added white to represent the contrasting shining lights. And he's even thought about how the light bounces off certain objects below. And this contrast between the dark, almost drab-looking interior and the garish artificial stage lighting really comes across in the final painting. And I think the fact that Sickert has focused on it here shows that he was observing these effects carefully in the planning stages. And I think that this piece ultimately shows us how interesting it is to see a study for a painting, so that we can feel a part of the artist's thought process and know what they're thinking about and what they're prioritising at the time. Moving on now to 1945 and Raymond Mason's striking painting, which depicts the celebrated French classical violinist Ginette Neveu. Neveu gained an international reputation when she was just 15 or 16 years old, and this piece was painted shortly after the artist saw her in concert in Birmingham in March 1945. And there's a great quote in the collection's catalogue which I think really captures the effect that Neveu had on people when she performed, and I want to read out a shortened version of that here. It's from a local newspaper in Birmingham called the Evening Dispatch, and it says, quote, "Those who heard for the first time the violin playing of Ginette Neveu at Birmingham Town Hall last night are not likely to forget soon this dark-haired 25-year-old French girl with the flashing eyes and flashing bow. Mademoiselle Neveu has a superb technique and a vital personality and manner that makes her a joy to watch as well as to hear." Unquote. So I think this gives us a bit of an idea about why Mason was inspired to paint this picture of Neveu after he saw her in concert. And I think what's really special about it is how engrossed Mason shows her to be. She's actually almost in harmony with her violin, with her rounded shoulder kind of echoing its rounded shape, and her confident angular hands echoing the black, thickly painted strings of the violin. And she's framed by an oval shape which is evocative of the spotlight which would have been illuminating her when Mason saw her playing, and this really pulls the image together nicely. It's a really charming painting, but it's actually quite a departure for Mason, who's actually best known for his detailed sculptures of tightly packed figure groups. So Swindon's piece is quite unique among his work, and in fact I think it's the only painting by Mason in the public collection in the UK, as far as I can see. And I think this, paired with the fact that Neveu tragically died in a plane crash at just 30 years old, makes this a really treasured piece in the collection, particularly because there don't seem to be many other paintings of Neveu. Finally, no conversation about art and music in Swindon's collection is complete without a look at Howard Hodgkin's Gramophone from around 1964 to 66. Now, I apologise in advance if you listened to my talk for the Swindon Spring Festival, because you will have already heard me talk about this piece, but I'll try not to repeat too much of the same information here. Now, Hodgkin is a really interesting and prolific painter, but he's quite difficult to categorise. He's often associated with the School of London, who I spoke about in the last episode in relation to R.B. Kitaj, but unlike most of those artists, he didn't focus on representing the figure so much. His work was more about finding ways to convey a feeling for a moment in time, and in doing this, he was always walking a kind of tightrope between abstraction and representation. He always had a very clear subject matter in mind when he started painting, which involved people and places that he knew at a particular moment in time. And in the case of Gramophone, it was two friends listening to music through a gramophone, of course. And then in the process of painting a piece, this memory of a scene would change and the painting would morph into shapes and colours. So over the course of 2 years, Gramophone transformed from something quite representational into a piece more expressive of Hodgkin's memory through colour, form and sound. In talking about Gramophone, Hodgkin described these occasions of his friends in their living room listening to music as fairly cheerful. And I think this is what comes through in the piece. The vibrant yellows, pinks, reds, oranges and greens are undeniably cheerful, and the organic forms feel light, relaxing and musical. On that positive note, I shall bring this episode to an end. I hope you managed to have the opportunity to listen to some music whilst responsibly enjoying the wonderful sunshine we're having at the time of recording. We may not be able to go to a festival, but we can certainly enjoy some chill time to ourselves with some great music, and maybe even be inspired to create some art whilst we're listening, like Hodgkin, Mason and Sickert did. Either way, I hope you've enjoyed this episode, and I hope you join me next week, and I hope you take care of yourselves, stay well and stay safe. Bye for now.